Hi, everyone. So I am here with congressional candidate Levi Tillemann running to represent the 6th Congressional District of Colorado. Now, you all know Levi from the now viral video of Steny Hoyer pressuring him to basically get out of the race. But today we're gonna talk about that, but we're also gonna learn more about Levi Tillemann and why he is in fact the best choice in the 6th Congressional District, in spite of what the establishment thinks. Levi, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I'm a big fan.
Thank you. That makes me really happy to hear that. So I wanted viewers to kind of get to know you because I think there's a lot of controversy surrounding your campaign, not because of you, but because of what's being done to you. So we'll get to that. But I just want to ask you, why run in such a polarized and difficult environment to run in? What made you decide to do that ultimately?
So I decided to run because I believe that we are at a critical juncture in our country's history, and that if good people don't stand up and fight for what they believe in, then bad people will win. And that is kind of the most simple way that I can encapsulate my decision to run. It had a lot to do with Donald Trump winning the presidency. I'm a very progressive guy, but I went out and I campaigned against him in the weeks leading up to the election because I knew that Donald Trump would bring his far right-wing agenda into the White House, and that would fundamentally transform the landscape of American politics in a way that was, really damaging to things that I care about deeply. And when he won, I knew immediately. I'd been working the polls in Philadelphia that night. I'd been getting people out to vote. Me and some of my friends were actually working to keep polls open so that all of the voters on the UPenn campus would get a chance to vote. And when we lost, I realized that our country was about to change dramatically and that I needed to redouble my efforts to stand up for the progressive values that I believe in.
Right, that totally makes sense. I want to ask you, just out of curiosity, because you were campaigning for Donald Trump, was it more of like an anti-Trump?
No, not for Donald Trump.
Oh, I'm sorry, against Donald Trump in favor of Hillary Clinton, to clarify. That's important. Presumably you voted for Hillary Clinton. Was it mostly an anti-Trump vote, like a lot of progressives have kind of talked about? Or did you see any value in electing Hillary? Or did you kind of think, like the rest of us progressives, that she's going to be elected and we're going to have to fight like hell to get her to be left-wing?
Yeah, at the end of the day, I knew that Hillary Clinton was a Washington insider and that she wasn't going to bring radical change to Washington. And I do think that we need radical change when it comes to our healthcare system, when it comes to our tax code, when it comes to our educational system. So many issues that we care deeply about relate to systems that are broken and systems that entrenched interests don't want to shake up. So I knew that Hillary was promising in a lot of ways more of the same, but I knew that Donald Trump was dangerous and that he represented a radical break in a direction that I didn't want our country to go. Donald Trump is an unstable guy, and the idea of him being in charge of our nuclear arsenal, that alone is enough to make me campaign like hell for almost anyone who would be against Donald Trump.
And we're kind of seeing that play out right now, how, we can see Donald Trump want peace with North Korea seemingly one day, and then the very next day threaten to bomb them, and then the next day change his mind again. Yeah, it's it's definitely an interesting time. So that makes sense. I've heard kind of the same thing from a lot of people, that it's the current state of politics, it's Donald Trump that got them to run. So specifically, if you were elected, there's a lot that needs fixing in this country. So what do you think would be the policies you focus on specifically?
So broadly, let's start broadly.
Sure.
I think the major theme for our campaign has been economic inequality. And that is something that is pervasive across America. It is a trend that is intensifying. And in Colorado, where I live, especially in the Denver metro area, you see it really starkly. You have a lot of new people moving into the area. You have a lot of new money moving into the area. You have a huge amount of gentrification in places like the North Side, where I grew up, which used to be a working class Latino neighborhood. And now is a very hip neighborhood with, you know, main streets that have juice cleanses and yoga mats and all that fun stuff that young people with money like. But what I see is the kids that I grew up with, the working class Latino kids in that neighborhood, are not benefiting from that economic growth. So for specific policies, the way that I think that we need to confront that inequality is, first of all, ensure that Americans have access to the basic things they need to thrive. And the first among those is healthcare. And that's why I support Medicare for all. Secondly, we need to make sure that all Americans have access to a high quality education. And that shouldn't rely on what zip code you're in. That shouldn't rely on how wealthy your neighborhood is. And when you go to college, I don't think that kids who come from middle class backgrounds and working class backgrounds should have to take out a mountain of debt just to get an education. And so I support free state four-year education for kids who come from families that make less than $120,000 a year. I think that's eminently reasonable. We can afford it, and it's important. Then there are bigger issues surrounding things like climate justice. We need to make sure that we're not impoverishing future generations by our decisions today. And that is why I'm pushing for a rapid transition to 100% renewable energy. That's my field. That is where I kind of cut my teeth professionally, and it's something that is deeply important to me. And then one final thing that is really important to me is, I don't want to forget the $15 an hour minimum wage.
Right.
That is another, that's another solution to inequality, and we have to make sure that that's indexed to inflation, because if it's
Absolutely.
not, then what we're going to have is the same situation we have today eventually, where we instituted a minimum wage that made sense a number of decades ago, but it gets eroded by inflation over time. And finally, Americans have to be equal under the law. And that includes our president, that includes white-collar criminals on Wall Street, and that is one reason why I'm so passionately in favor of impeaching Donald Trump, because I think Donald Trump is a criminal. I think we need to bring him to trial. I think that we need to make sure that all of the facts are on the record, and that's what happens during the course of a Senate trial. That fact finding and that discovery is put on the record, and then we need to require senators to put their name down as to whether they think this man has committed crimes and crimes against the republic and crimes against the office of the presidency or not. And I think that's a really important process that we need to pursue as patriotic Americans.
One thing that I like about what you said there when I asked you about policy is that you actually led with policy, you know, showing that you stand with something. And I totally agree with all of those things. But you didn't make impeaching Donald Trump a plank of your platform, which basically not necessarily the plank, but the only thing you care about, because I see a lot of centrist Democrats launching campaigns based on opposing Donald Trump. And of course, that's important. I don't think Democrats do enough to oppose Donald Trump. But I think that the main failure of Democrats who aren't very progressive like yourself is that they're unable to demonstrate that they're not just anti-Trump and that they stand for, you know, other policies as well. Because, yeah, I agree. Donald Trump, I mean, the day he was sworn in, he was in violation of the emoluments clause of the Constitution. And that's just not a minimum. So I don't see how you can't be against Donald Trump if you claim to care about the Constitution. But at the same time, impeaching Donald Trump alone won't suffice as an electoral strategy, because there are people hurting. And I think that you really strike this balance of opposing Donald Trump and also caring about the people. And I'm seeing this a lot with progressives, which is why I think there's so much excitement. Now, getting to excitement, I know that you don't take corporate money. So how are you raising money? Are you soliciting small dollar donations? I mean, can you talk about the struggle? Because I know that your opponent in the primary is outraising you. He raised over $1 million, and that's because we all know he's taking money from, you know, special interests. So how difficult is it to raise money? I know that there's a lot of excitement, but individual donations can only do so much. So can you kind of talk about the financing aspect? Because this is something that I think is really important for progressives that do want to run.
Absolutely. So we're a people-powered campaign, and what you said is spot on. Our primary opponent was funded very early on by Washington insiders and the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. And that's actually a really good segue into the discussion about the Steny Hoyer tape, if you don't mind me going there.
Oh, I'd love to, yeah.
So you're welcome to intro a little bit about what happened there, but essentially Steny Hoyer came to Denver, Colorado to do a fundraiser for my primary opponent. And he also asked for a meeting with me, and I accepted that offer. But I had a really good sense as to what was going to transpire in that meeting. And so we wanted to make sure that that meeting was on the record. And there are a couple of things that happened in the course of that meeting that I would say are not generally focused on by the media, but comprise the real scandal. A lot of people think that the scandal is that Steny Hoyer was trying to push me out of the race. And without a doubt, he was. But the real scandal is the fact that Steny Hoyer admitted openly and brazenly that they had selected the candidate for the 6th congressional district more than a year before a single vote was cast, even in our party caucuses, that they had selected the candidate for the 6th congressional district when he still lived outside of the district and nobody in the district knew who he was. And the second thing is that he admitted that they had worked proactively since before day one to load this guy up with insider money, to load him up with cash from special interest PACs, and to load him up with data and endorsements and everything they thought he needed to be a ringer in the primary election. And then I would say that I would say I'll add a third part, which is there's a third part to the scandal, which is they then proceeded to lie about that. And to me, that's the part that really makes this kind of sinister, that my opponent in the primary and the DCCC decided that their first major strategic decision was to collude against the voters of the 6th congressional district and to deceive them about the exclusive relationship between my primary opponent and Washington insiders who are intent on rigging a primary election. And that is the real scandal. Steny Hoyer attempting to push me out of the race, that's kind of like the cherry on top, but it's not the meat of the scandal. I guess I'm mixing different foods there. You don't put a cherry on top of but really the meat of the scandal is everything that came before, starting very early in 2017 and leading up to November when the DCCC placed my opponents on the red to blue list, and then December when Steny Hoyer came to town and held a fundraiser for him and attempted to push me out of the race. And I would say continuing on to about a month ago when Ben Ray Lujan went on national public radio and said point blank that polling showed that my opponent was the only candidate who could beat Mike Kaufman in a general election. And we called on them to release that polling. They pointed eventually to a poll that didn't even include my name. So I'm not really sure how that can prove that one candidate can win as opposed to another candidate. And then we called their bluff before they pointed to that poll, and we invested some of our money in conducting our own poll. And what our poll showed, and it was done by a very reputable polling firm, the same one that was used for their poll, is that I actually beat the Republican incumbent with my progressive policies and my background in renewable energy and working for the Obama administration by a larger margin than their Washington insider anointed candidate. And to me, that is the arc of the scandal. It starts in early 2017, if not before, and it extends until today when my primary opponent is using PAC money and money from the DCCC and Washington insiders to purchase, last they purchased $120,000 of television advertising. And the issue that they have focused on is entirely disingenuous. They're focusing on the fact that he, quote unquote, does not take corporate PAC money. We produced a response video to that I recommend everybody watch, which shows that that is demonstrably false. But nonetheless, they're using this insider money. They're using this corporate money. They're using this PAC money to buy hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of advertisements emphasizing the fact that they don't take corporate money. And to wrap it all up with a bow, he refuses to debate. And so what they're doing is they're turning this into a one-way conversation fueled by corporate money and aimed at deceiving the voters of the 6th Congressional District. So if you're interested in learning more, check us out on Facebook. Please like the page while you're there. And you can check out my webpage at leviforcolorado.com. We really do need your support.
Okay, you said a lot, and now I have like 100 different questions. So let me try to figure out, because there's so much about this. First of all, I can't not note the irony in because I mean your district is a very competitive district. So if electability is truly what they care about, then after you realize that polling shows that you're better positioned to defeat the Republican, how could they not switch gears and back you, or at least remain neutral, if that's truly what they care about? To me, it seems as though they don't really care about electability, and what the DCCC and even DNC, Democrats at large, tend to care about is getting someone in Congress that won't upset the Democratic Party's donors. And I feel like you would upset the Democratic Party's donors, which is why they're all kind of raining down on you to get you to drop out. So a couple questions regarding the incident itself. What made you want to record it? And did Steny Hoyer know that you were recording?
So we had a number of conversations with Washington insiders where they told us one thing behind closed doors and then went out and did something completely different, where they promised us one thing and then went out and did another thing, where they represented something to us and then went out and misrepresented something else to the media. And so we decided that we'd seen that movie one time too many, and we wanted an insurance policy. We are we are fighters, and when we feel that somebody is breaking the rules consistently, then we're going to hold them accountable for that.
Did you try to use it as leverage? Meaning, like, did you tell them you have this recording, stop trying to rig the process, or we're going to release it, or did you just kind of put it out there?
No, but it's funny that you should mention that, because I mentioned the fact that I had the recording to a number of people who I knew who had some relationship with the DCCC, and a number of those people were, they're just part of the game. They suggested that I try to use the recording to blackmail the DCCC, and my immediate response was, if we do that, then we become part of the problem. Mm-hmm. Then we are buying into everything that we need to be standing against. And so that was never even considered. When it was mentioned by an associate of mine who works in Washington, D.C., it was immediately shot down. And we told him, look, this is the problem with Washington, D.C. today. And I think that goes back to your point on Trump. I think if we're fighting to impeach Trump because we think that he is damaging the long-term interests of working Americans, if we are fighting to impeach Trump because we think that he's endangering our families and our communities, and he is destroying America's reputation at home and abroad, then fighting for impeachment is the right thing to do. But if we're fighting to impeach Trump because we are making political calculations and we're trying to play three-dimensional chess as to whether this is a good thing for the Democratic Party or a bad thing for the Democratic Party, or conversely, if we don't want to impeach Trump because we're making those same calculations, which is what we see from Nancy Pelosi, what we see from a number of different leaders in Washington, then we're doing the wrong thing. And I think the guiding principle of the Democrats in 2018 is pretty simple. It should be do the right thing, fight for truth.
I totally respect that, because Lord knows how scared they would have been if you told them you have this scandalous recording. So yeah, I respect that. I wanted to, on the subject of the recording, ask you about Nancy Pelosi's response, because when she was asked about this recording, she said, I don't have the quote, but just to paraphrase, that she was more worried about whether or not the recording itself was legal, which it is legal, than the actual contents of the recording. And for the most part, it seems as though the Democratic Party, specifically the DCCC, has done nothing to really respond to this in any significant way, when a lot of progressives, I mean, if they want to cultivate trust, don't you think that they should do something? So I just wanted to get your opinion on their response, because I thought it was a joke.
Absolutely. It has been an incredible disappointment, up and down the food chain. So Nancy Pelosi's complete lack of concern regarding Steny Hoyer and the DCCC's efforts to rig a Democratic primary is a disappointment. Congressman Hoyer's refusal to apologize and to acknowledge what he did is a disappointment. And the fact that my primary opponent went into hiding and has not commented once publicly on this is a huge disappointment. He was in league with the DCCC as they sought to deceive the voters of the 6th Congressional District, and he needs to come clean. Instead, he's doubling down on that deception. And if you look at his ad buy, if you look at the ads that he's running this week, they are not meant to educate. They are meant to mislead. And that is what we are fighting against. And I hope all of you guys go to our Facebook page and look at the video that we put together, pushing back against those efforts. I think it's really powerful.
So what I like is that clearly you don't seem to be rattled by Steny Hoyer, because I just listened to the recording again before chatting with you, and it seemed like he was a mafia boss. Like he was saying, you know, I would like for you to drop out, but if you don't drop out, then I'd like for you to refrain from attacking Crow or criticizing Crow. And you have not taken, you know, what he said. You are criticizing Crow, and that's part of a primary. So can you speak to the importance of primaries, and why, even though the Democratic Party thinks that they're inconvenient and you know, they don't like primaries, why we should be having primaries in the age of Trump when Republicans are winning like nonstop? Do you believe this theory that they keep talking about, that it weakens the Democrat in the general?
Absolutely not. And I would say the opposite is true. When you seek to disenfranchise a significant element of your natural base, then that reduces people's enthusiasm during the general election. If you let them have at it and you say, may the best ideas win, may the best candidate win, then I think that there is a very strong argument for exercising unity after that and coming together and working hard to beat the Republican. But when you seek to disenfranchise a huge portion of the Democratic base, then it makes it harder for people to come together after the primary. And that is why what the DCCC and these Washington insiders and these special interest PACs are doing is so dangerous to democracy, and why it is so dangerous to our prospects in November.
Totally. Yeah. I'm glad. I was going to ask you about that, but you kind of touched on it, whether or not you think that disenfranchising voters is more harmful than just having a spirited debate. So yeah, it seems like Crow is a political opportunist. He doesn't want to debate you, which, I mean, that's common if you look at incumbents being challenged by, you know, a progressive or whatnot. But for someone who doesn't hold that seat, it's
Yes.
so embarrassing to not want
exactly
to debate your primary opponent. It shows that he's scared. And why would he be scared? He has the DCCC, he has the entire Democratic Party on his side, and also he has a lot more money than you, even though his Republican opponent, or both of your Republican opponents rather, is currently outraising you guys because he's rolling in corporate money. I mean, if you have the upper hand, what's to be afraid of? That's kind
exactly
of my question.
right. And they are doing the kind of ad buys during the primary that you generally wouldn't see until October in a general election. They are running scared. We can win this. Our polling shows that this is wide open, that more than 50% of voters are undecided, and that we're both polling in the 20s. So despite the fact that they have outspent us 5-1, we are neck and neck, and they are just dumping corporate money and Washington insider money on our district, trying to drown out our voice, and they don't even have the guts to debate. I'll also say that one district over, in the 1st congressional district, you have a very strong progressive candidate named Saira Rao, who is challenging an incumbent congresswoman named Diana DeGette. Well, you know what? DeGette debated Rao. They had a free and spirited contest of ideas, and I think it was healthy for democracy. I am so glad that DeGette did that. And Crow, who is not an incumbent, who has never held elected office, and whose only advantage is the fact that he is rolling in insider cash, is refusing to debate us, which considering the fact that we're polling neck and neck, and that 50% of the electorate is undecided, that is a huge disservice to democracy. That is robbing our potential constituents of the opportunity to size these candidates up one-on-one, and it is robbing them of the opportunity to ask tough questions to both myself and to Jason Crow, my opponent. So we've actually invited him to a debate on Monday. We have said that if he doesn't show up, what we're going to do is we're going to make a cardboard cutout of Jason Crow. We're calling it the Cardboard Crow. We might festoon it with significant amounts of money. And we are going to, if Crow shows up, have a debate. And if Crow doesn't show up, then I will allow constituents to ask me questions that they think are important, that they think are relevant to this race, and ask the Cardboard Crow questions that they have for Jason Crow. And then maybe we'll answer for him based on what we've seen him say on the record.
That is one of the best things I think I've ever heard in my life. Another thing you could do is what I saw Zephyr Teachout do is you could threaten to debate his donors, since really they're the ones who pull all the strings. Maybe they might show up.
Not a bad idea. Not a bad idea.
Yeah. So basically, Levi, what it seems like you're telling me is that for someone who's running in the Democratic Party, it's almost as if they should try to actually pretend at least to care about democracy, right?
You would think. Yeah, look, what I always say is we are not fighting for the Democratic Party. We are fighting for principles and for democracy with a small d. And my loyalties lie to those principles and lie with democracy, not with big D Democrats who can become corrupted just like Republicans are corrupted. So we need to make sure that we keep our eye on the prize. And that's what we're doing here in the 6th. And quite frankly, I think it's working. We need all of your help. We need anyone who's in Denver, anyone who's in Aurora, anyone who is in the district here to come in and volunteer with us and walk with us and make sure that we're getting our message out. And if you can, please contribute as well, because we can win this. And it is not an exaggeration to say that this is the most important Democratic primary in the country right now. It doesn't have to do with me. It has to do with the fact that my campaign and the people around me stood up to Washington's corruption. And that is what we're continuing to do. And they are infuriated that we have the audacity to speak truth to power and that we intend to win. But we need your help to do that.
So when I initially talked about the recording on my show, this is what I said. I said that progressives who are in your position need to threaten the Democratic Party establishment to run as third party, even if you're bluffing. My argument was that what you should do is say, since I'm not getting a fair shot, I'm not going to give the corporate Democrat a fair shot in the event he does end up winning. So let me ask you this, since you've kind of you've seen it firsthand, you know how the sausage is made. In the event you were to come up with that type of threat to them, like Donald Trump did, against the RNC back in 2016 and 2015, Do you think that that would scare them? Would that be a strategy that would work if progressives rather start threatening to run as third-party candidates if they don't get a fair shake in Democratic primaries? Do you think they would even care? Or do you think that they just disregard that? Or do you think that strategy could potentially work if progressives are willing to play dirty?
Maybe in the future, but in Colorado, we have what they refer to not so euphemistically as sore loser laws. And so if, for instance, we get through the primary and I win the primary and Jason Crow loses the primary, but he decides because he's a very centrist, sort of right-wing corporate Democrat, he wants to run as a centrist, as a third-party candidate. He's not actually allowed to do that.
Wow.
And so, unfortunately, here in Colorado, that leverage doesn't exist. You have to decide from the beginning, are you going to run as a third-party candidate, or are you going to run within the tent of the Democratic Party? And I will say that it is a tough decision for a lot of progressives in Colorado to affiliate as Democrats or affiliate as something else when they see this kind of corruption that is endemic within Washington, D.C., and is unfortunately colonizing our politics here in Colorado.
That's really interesting. Now that you tell me about the sore loser law, which I wasn't familiar with, I think that if this strategy was, implemented nationwide, we'd see probably a lot more sore loser laws. So that was one thing that I kind of thought as, progressives' main leverage. But that's really interesting. So yeah, hey, I hope that you kick Jason Crow's ass. You're running a fantastic campaign, and I think that a lot of people believe in you, and I think that that's showing because you're doing really well in spite of the odds. So one more time, tell us what we can do if we want to get involved. Where can we go if we want to donate to you? If we want to make sure you beat Jason Crow, what do we do?
Well, first of all, thank you again for having me on the show. I love watching your show. You are such a thoughtful critic of our country and of our political system and of our media sphere. And I really am thrilled to be on the show. And
that means a lot. Thank you.
Here's what I need from your viewers and your listeners. We need you to come out and knock doors with us. We need you, if you're not in Colorado, to make calls for us. We need you to go to our website, www.levi4colorado.com, and send an email to my field director, Joe Ehrlich. He's at joe@levi4colorado.com, and tell him you want to help. And if you can, we need you to donate because we are outgunned, and every single dollar you donate is going towards canvassing. It's going towards literature. It's going towards buying water for the people who are coming out and working all day in the hot sun to make sure that we win the most important Democratic primary in the US right now. And so we need your help. We really appreciate your activism. We appreciate your engagement, and thanks for watching Mike's show, and give us a call. Check out our Facebook page, like it, check me out on Twitter, and I hope I hear from you soon. I'm around the office, so if you drop by, you'll get to meet me, and I look forward to meeting you as well.
And before we go, one thing I want to ask is the date of the primary, and if there's anything people need to know with regard to registration. Do they have to be registered as a Democrat to support you? Is there anything with regard to that that's important?
That's a great point. So for the first time, both independents and Democrats are allowed to vote in our Democratic primaries. So if you're an independent and you live in Colorado, we need your vote. If you're a Democrat, we definitely need your vote. You had to be registered by, I believe, May 26th in order to vote in the primary. But if you were registered by that date, then you will be receiving a ballot. If you didn't request the Democratic ballot, then you'll get both a Republican and a Democratic ballot. Only send in the Democratic ballot or they'll throw both of them away. And our primary voting starts on June 5th or 6th. It's a mail-in system. You'll receive your primary ballot in the mail, and it continues all the way up through June 26th. Election day, we have an election month, and we need your help to make sure that we close that election month out as strong as we possibly can.
All right. Well, we're all certainly going to be watching. Hey, I hope you pull it off. It looks like you're doing great. So thank you so much, Levi.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.